Brilliant. And just welcome everybody to our second week on my weekly lives. So these are leadership roundtables, and what I want to do with these roundtables is just deep dive into one little element that is either specific to your own leadership or the practice of transformation vis-a-vis humanizing. So that's what these roundtables are about. And today we are talking about 4 habits that every transformation leader or every leader working in the world of transformation, we believe should know about. And just as I mentioned, every week it is a roundtable, so please don't think that this is a webinar where it's all about silence and just listening to somebody present. If there are any questions that you've got, there'll definitely be time at the end, but pop them into the Q&A area. And if you want to stop me and ask me a question mid-flow, just raise your hand, no problem whatsoever. I welcome the discussion today, absolutely. Okay, so agenda for today. What I want to do is just split it into 3 small parts. The first thing I want to do is talk to everybody about a lesson in transformation mechanic. And it's very, very interesting because I put a poll out on Monday. I don't know how many of you saw it, but I asked people about the idea of habit and how many people use habits in the conscious design of change and transformation programs. And I've had a few people come to me directly via direct messaging saying, oh my goodness, it's something that I've never thought about. And indeed that is lesser known transformation mechanic. And then what I want to do is head straight into what those 4 habits are, because that's what today's roundtable is about. And if we can then go into a little bit of a Q&A. Those of you that were with me last week, we talked last week about the profiles of modern leadership. We talked about the different types of leader required to drive and accelerate transformation. And one of the key things there, amongst others, was that it's not about one size fits all. We talked about multiple different types of profile required for different types of audiences. So we talked a little bit about that. But what we also talked about last week was the importance of role modeling, the importance of having role model leaders. And last week, what we said was, if you are in a transformation or change environment that is starting from a place of low trust, you've got a gap. So the way to fill the gap is to really lean in and encourage the development and the presence of role model leadership. And that's quite interesting, because if you think about more traditional schematics and designs of transformation and change, you'll find that leadership development or capability is maybe an afterthought or something that happens partway through. Whereas what we're saying here is the idea of role model leadership is something that really needs to be up there, prioritized and invested in the start, because we all know that cultures shift by looking up. And that's the kind of gap that we can create into a gain. Now, that segue into today's session, into today's roundtable. There are 2 areas in our daily practice that need equal attention. And again, this is part of this lesser known fact in part 1 that I want to talk about today. There is, of course, our conscious practice, the stuff that we do consciously in terms of problem solving, in terms of decision making, all of that stuff is in our conscious practice. And so much of change, transformation, and leadership development is focused and centered in that conscious element of our leadership practice. But there's another area, which is our unconscious practice, the things that we do that we are not aware of. And that is really important for us, because that gives us the answer to that lesser known area of transformation design. And if you look at the skew, you notice earlier on I said equal attention. There are 2 areas of our practice that we should be placing equal attention to. Is because if we split our practice into conscious and unconscious, you will see that it's almost 50-50. 45% of our day is unconscious practice, 55% of it is conscious. Moreover, 95% of our daily decision making is unconscious. 95% of our decision making is unconscious. That's phenomenal. Now, what do I mean when I'm talking about unconscious practice? I am, of course, talking about habits. and the power of habits. And the work that we do in quantum leadership and in our work with leaders and transformation teams is hugely focused on the design of habits and how we develop new habits and release old ones. So today is very much in that space of the unconscious practice in our leadership and transformation design. And what I want to do today is introduce you to the 4 habits of highly successful transformation leaders. I had to put it in there, didn't I? I had to put a little bit of a Stephen Covey type kind of line in there. So that's my little nod to his effective leadership habits. But today I want to talk about 4. But I want to talk about 4 particular habits. And the particular habits I want to talk about are keystone habits. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware of or have been introduced to or have even dabbled and experimented with the idea of keystone habits. So I don't know, I'll pop it out there. Anybody want to give me a little bit of an explainer for what a keystone habit might be? Vivian.
I'll have a go. So
Yeah.
Keystone habit is a habit that leverages other positive habits. And so that could be, an example could be that you start exercising just a little bit, but that leads to an overall well-being, awareness, better sleep, which is obviously a really good habit. And so that's my understanding of keystone habits.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And a great example, because exercise is one of the best examples for us to engage with people so that they understand what it means and they can connect with the power of what a keystone habit is. And the word keystone, of course, comes, is centuries old, and it comes from architecture. And that's, if you have a look at this picture here, the keystone is that stone right at the top in the middle that is allowing all of the other stones to create that arch. If you took that keystone out, the arch would completely crumble. So it holds the least amount of weight, but it has the most amount of power. And I find that absolutely incredible. So that's what I'm talking about today. It's not just 4 habits. We're talking about 4 keystone habits, just as Vivian said, habits that in and of themselves have a domino effect that create other habits. So keystone habits are brilliant for accelerating, absolutely brilliant for accelerating. So let's have a look. We'll go straight into these 4 keystone habits. So keystone habit number 1, and I've put journaling up there because journaling is one of the 4. They're not in any particular order, but I had to put journaling up first because my own personal story of journaling. About 15 years ago, when I was introduced to executive coaching, and I was given through investment of the organization that I was working with as an exec leader, and I was leading digital transformation for this organization, I was given access to a coach, and one of the first things she said to me is, Mel, you've got to start journaling. And I have to confess, I thought, are you having a laugh? Really? Is it voodoo, hoodoo, meditation, journaling? Seriously, is that going to help my leadership? Is that going to help me in my transformation? And of course, I was open-minded. I gave it a go. And yes, it really did. And it absolutely changed my life. It was a cornerstone as well as a keystone for me. Journaling is a hugely powerful keystone habit because it allows us to clarify. It allows us to narrow in. It allows us to focus energy and attention and intention. And that's so incredibly important. Intention and attention are 2 massive accelerators for modern leadership and transformation. And what we've done in quantum leadership and through the Dylan Way framework is we've identified 4 areas of journaling. And the 4 areas of journaling are intentional journaling, which is basically I need to clarify and really understand what I need to do. Reflective journaling, looking back on what I've done, what are the learnings, what could I do better next time? The journaling of presence, which is just keeping yourself and reminding yourself throughout your day of being who you are and being present, active listening, etc. And finally, creation, where we're able to brainstorm and we want to lean into creativity. There's no outcome, there's no end goal, it's just play, it's just creation. Those are the 4 types of journaling. And if you listen to the way that I describe those 4 types of journaling, of course, there's a natural kind of timing. There's a natural cadence of when they are best exercised and habitually used in the day. So intentional journaling would be what you would do in the morning. Reflective journaling is what you do at the end of the day. Presence of journaling is what you could do in the moments of your day. And creative journaling is when you look into a very specific time of your day and you're able to just go into free flow. So journaling is one of the 4 keystone habits. And I cannot stress to you enough the simplicity and yet the power of journaling. And I'm just going to put it out there. And just, Lorraine, I know that you are an avid journaling leader now, and it would be really great if you don't mind just sharing how it has been powerful for you.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So when Mel first mentioned this, probably about a year ago, Mel, I had the same responses you've just said you had when it was said to you. I was like, you're having a laugh. I don't have time to do this. And I do recall actually having a conversation with you early doors to say, look, I'm struggling with this. And your advice was start with just 3 words. Don't feel you've got to write a sentence or a paragraph or 3 pages. Just start with 3 words. And those 3 words now happen for me every day. This is my book. I don't know if you can see
you got a book. We can see it. It's brilliant.
I've got a book. It says, make your dreams happen.
I love it.
And I have to say, I kind of flip between all of the different types of journaling, but not necessarily on a conscious level. It's just how it comes out. So I suppose mostly I do more of the free flow stuff, but often it's reflective. Sometimes it's about, right, you know what, I'm setting my intent. And sometimes of a day, I'll just pick it up in the moment and think, I just want to take a note of that. And where I've found it even more powerful is in taking time to read it back and go back the way and actually look at what was I thinking this time last week or this time last month, and really reinforcing that learning. I use it for, all sort of different aspects of the Dylan way, I suppose, and where that's manifesting in my practice. So I find it really useful sometimes in terms of just one of the days, my reflective journaling will simply be to read, this time last year or something similar. So for me, it's a habit. It was a conscious thing that I tried as a power up and it became a habit.
That's brilliant. I love it. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Lorraine. And I know I put you on the spot there, which is probably breaking one of the cardinal rules of Roundtables, actually just honing in on somebody. But I really welcome that share and that openness. And the other thing as well is that if you think about the way that you practice, if you think about the way that you move through your daily life, you're probably doing a little bit of one of these things anyway. It's just making it more conscious. And once you're making it conscious, then you can consciously make it a habit to then put it into a neural pathway that becomes unconscious over time. And I was talking with a lady yesterday who I'm working with, a leader on quantum leadership, and she dropped the ball. She dropped the ball because she's in a really, really complex transformational environment at the moment, and the conditions and the environment around her became greater than her own leadership presence. And as a result, things start falling apart around her. And one of the things that fell apart was her habit, her practice of journaling, because it wasn't yet embedded. It was still embryonic. She was still establishing it, and she dropped it. And what's really interesting is when she was describing the time that she wasn't journaling to me yesterday, what she said was this: I feel less in control. I've lost that ability to keep on it. And she said, it's only retrospectively, having put myself into the gap of this Keystone habit, have I recognized now what the true gain of it is. And I just thought that was a really great story to share with everybody today. So Keystone habit number 1, journaling. It's brilliant. Honestly, there you go. There's 2 of us saying it's absolutely amazing, even though you think it might be pretty simple. And what is Keystone number 2? Keystone number 2 is frame of reference. Now, our frame of reference, both in terms of our own frame of reference and also supporting the development of our peers and the leaders around us to increase their frame of reference. Now, what do I mean by frame of reference? Well, if you think about frame of reference, frame meaning boundary, reference being the knowledge that you can refer to, the insight that you can refer to. So it's the boundaries of insight that we have as leaders. That's what we mean by frame of reference. And in terms of boundaries, we have two key boundaries. We have a forward-looking boundary and an outward-looking boundary. And what I mean by that is very simply looking forward into the future. So that would be around trends, that would be more specific to technology or emerging technologies. Really, really important for us as modern leaders to have a forward-looking frame of reference. And we don't want to deep dive into blockchain, but what we do and should be aware of are the strategic implications of blockchain to our sector and where the trends of that technology are going in other sectors that might have implication for us in the future. It's so incredibly important for us to have that forward-looking lens. And then we've got the outward-looking lens. What do I mean by the outward-looking lens? The outward-looking lens is what we call forces of change. And what we mean by forces of change are forces of change in terms of planet, in terms of society, community, what's happening in education, what's happening in the environment, etc., etc. So having that outward frame of reference, and that's really important as well. So what you're looking for here is you're looking for a keystone habit that continually, subconsciously keeps nudging out your forward and your outward lens. And this is super important for leaders within your change environment as well. So if you've got leaders by label, so your executive team or maybe sponsors of transformation and change within your organization, this frame of reference Keystone Habit is a super important one to encourage them to adopt and develop. Keystone Habit number 2. So what do we have as Keystone Habit number 3? Keystone Habit number 3, and I can see a smile on Vivian's face because this one is definitely my favorite and it's a brilliant one. Keystone Habit number 3 is what we call the 1% power up. Now, any of you that have been introduced to the practice of flow, when you get in that flow state, one of the things that is so amazing with 1% power ups is over time, it can really help you generate that flow state in your daily practice. That, that thing where you just get straight into the zone and you don't know where the time went, but oh my God, look at what you've achieved. This is the tiny microscopic start point for you to get to that practice of flow. So what do we mean by a 1% power up? It's so incredibly easy. It means adding richness to your day by 1%. And just imagine this. If you increase the success of your day by 1%, at the end of a week, you've increased your success as a leader by 5%. After a month, 25 to 30%. After a year, 300+%. You could go on a super expensive leadership development program, and there's no way in a month of Sundays it is going to allow you to increase your leadership success by something akin to 300%. But this tiny little 1% power up every day absolutely does. So when I say power up, what exactly do I mean in terms of adding increase to your day? There are 4 types of power up that we want to be aware of as leaders. And every day you can choose anyone you want. Or if you're very, very, very specifically working on a project that's really, really narrow focus and really requires your attention, you might want to just focus in on a particular type of power up over a period of time. So let's have a look at these 4 types of power up. So the first type of power up is what we call the effective power up. And this is everything to do with productivity. Everything to do with productivity. So I had a productivity effective power up yesterday, and it was to re-engage with Evie.com. And Evie.com is a virtual assistant that I've used for ages, but I've just dropped the ball on it. And yesterday I thought to myself, I really want to increase my productivity on a day, and meetings and agendas for me are probably one of the most complex elements of my daily life. And Evie is a virtual assistant who can help. So yesterday, all I did is spend 5 minutes going back into Evie and re-engaging my Evie.com account. That's all I did. But you know what I did? I powered up my day effectively to make it more productive by 1% by doing that. And today, I'm already better off because at 7 a.m. this morning, Evie told me exactly what I've got planned for the day ahead. And do I need to reschedule something, or are there any meetings that I would like her to schedule for me? Bingo, it's done. I didn't do anything. I'm already benefiting from that productivity habit. The next power up is the experience power up. And what we mean by this is when we add richness of experience to our human condition as an individual, our own, or to somebody else's. So it's doing something tiny today for you, or doing something tiny today for somebody else. I know that sounds really, really simple, but it's incredibly important for us. So my power up today was to send one email to somebody that I haven't connected with for a long time. And she's been in the back of my mind. She's been taking attention away from me over the last couple of weeks, and I've done nothing about it. So today, my experience activity was very simply wanting to enrich another person's life by 1%. I've sent her an email just to say hello. It can be that simple. The third type of 1% power up is what we call energy, and it's about presence. And Sanjay, I know you're almost a guru in the world of presence, being present and developing presence. This is very important for us when we're in the world of change and transformation, because if we have presence and if we are being present, it's very close psychologically to trust. So it can really benefit that development of trust because it shows authenticity, right? It develops connection. So the energy power up is twofold. For you to think about how you can be present in something that you've got scheduled today. So that might be some stuff that's going on in your day. There might be a particular meeting that you're not too happy about. There might be an agenda item in that meeting that you're presenting. What you want to do perhaps today is think to yourself, you know what, I'm going to make sure that in that meeting, I'm not zoning out of everybody else. I'm just waiting for me to present. I'm genuinely going to actively listen and be present for the entire meeting and not just focus on when is it my time to speak. So really, really important, the being present or having presence energy power up. And the final keystone for 1% power up is the experimental one. And this is, of them all, is probably my favorite one. It's just, you know what, give yourself the ability for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or 7 minutes a day to scratch an itch. And what I mean by scratch an itch is do something that interests you, that you're curious about, that you just would love to know a little bit more about. And again, remember, no outcome, no goal, no fixed end point. It's just scratching an itch. And that's the experimental power up. All you want to do is choose one of those power ups every single day. And that is so incredibly powerful for increasing your success as a transformational leader. And what I would say is these 1% power ups are brilliant for change and transformation teams. If you're thinking about change and transformation, there are so many statistics. There's a new report out just last week talking about the burnout rate of people that are working in change and transformation. It's on the increase with everything that's happening around us. Just empowering and enabling and supporting this 1% power up Keystone habit across your team, not just for yourself, is really, really great way of encouraging well-being and psychological safety. So, the power of this particular Keystone goes out way beyond. And the final and fourth Keystone habit is growth development, personal growth development. And I know that this is definitely something that Stephen Covey talks about. Every single highly successful leader has a learning habit. They have a learning habit, a growth development habit. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, Mel, wasn't Keystone habit number 2 frame of reference? Isn't that about growth development? No, because frame of reference is specific to emerging technologies and forces of change. specific to transformation work, your own leadership, etc., change and transformation. Growth development is just diverse. This is personal to you, right? At the moment, I'm learning about herbs in the garden, edible gardens. So, and I'm loving it, and it's absolutely fantastic. Now, the next thing you're going to say to me is, where is this connecting in with change and transformation and my own modern leadership? Well, it's this. If you look at the most creative ideas, if you look at the most successful transformational products, strategies, organizations, and leaders through history, you will find that the majority of ideas have come from something completely outside of their focus area. And one of the lovely examples that I was, believe it or not, totally by coincidence and serendipity, I was reading last night in a book that I'm reading at the moment, which is called Go Luck Yourself, which is a great book for anybody to read. It's a really easy book. But reading the book last night, the chapter that I was reading was talking about how, from a transformation and change strategy, how growth development and learning new disconnected things in our personal life is so incredibly important. And it talks to one very good example, Velcro. Do we all know Velcro? We all know the word Velcro, right? So Velcro is where you've got one material that's got thousands and thousands and thousands of tiny little hooks in it, and then you've got another piece which is nice and smooth. Velcro is velvet and hooks, which is the hooks that you have on burrs. So Velcro, and that's where the word comes from. Now, it was designed by a gentleman who was learning about how to look after his pets, and how do you get the burrs off your pets, in particular for him, his dogs. And instead of just thinking about that, when he was thinking about ideas and inventions and so on and so forth, he put the two together, and he thought, these tiny little hooks that are on the burrs that I'm trying to get out of my dog, wow, they could be perfect for what I'm trying to productize at the moment, which is where the idea of Velcro came from. So if you think about completely disassociated things that you might be learning, it is amazing how those things can come into play when you're trying to ideate or brainstorm or create strategies and vision. So it's really, really important for us to also give ourselves time for growth development. Now, of course, I've called it a Keystone Habit, right? So it sounds a little bit like it's a thing, it's an action, you just do it. No, it's a Keystone Habit. So for us, every single month, we thematically focus on something that is personally motivating and interesting to us to learn and deep dive a little bit more. So every month, just something different thematically. And that's all it needs to be. Just a different theme that's personally resonating with us. That's an interest or a motivation. And that's basically it. So, it's really brilliant Keystone, and it allows us to be incredibly expansive in our thinking as long as we are consistent with it. So that's super important. And those are the 4 Keystone Habits. Now, you look at each one of them and you might not think that they all need to be or should be habits, or indeed in your particular practice at the moment as a leader, or maybe in change and transformation that you're involved in, that they're not habitual. And this is the thing, this is where the secret sauce comes into play. If we can transform them from conscious awareness into that unconscious awareness and establish them as habits, then that means that we are putting some fantastic tools in our arsenal for change and transformation, because we will be doing them instinctively. And that's so incredibly important. And that just segues back to what I started talking about at today's session, when I gave you a little bit of a summary of what we talked about last week in terms of the power of role model leadership. Is what we see here in George Eliot's quote: we first make our habits and then our habits make us. So if we're consciously thinking about habits and thinking about these 4 Keystone Habits, then that's a fantastic way for us to start developing and building voice and visibility as a credible, reputable, modern leader. And that is, filling the gap of trust with a powerful gain in change and transformation. So there we go, guys. Those are the 4 Keystone Habits that we work on in quantum leadership and in the Dylan Way framework. And I guess just one thing before I open it out and we have a little bit of a roundtable discussion. The thing for me is this: if it's too hard, it's not small enough. If it's too hard, it's not small enough. I'm working with an organization at the moment, and we're designing some change implementation strategies. So we've got the vision and we've got the design and all of that, but now it's about how do we do it, approaching it and delivering it. And what's really interesting is there's a little bit of a rub in the design team around, we can't do that. We've got to move slower because the capability isn't there in the audiences, in the end users yet. Or something similar that I've heard in the group is this: we haven't got the capability yet. So we need to wait until we've got the capability. We need to go slower. And what you can hear in those two examples is this: slow, slow, slow. And actually, transformation isn't about going slower. Successful transformation is about going smaller. That's what's so incredibly important. We don't want to go slow. What we want to do is we want to go small, because that will mean that we accelerate transformation over time. And human transformation is a J curve. So if we can go small, we know that we will reach a tipping point of acceleration. If we go slow, we're just going slow, right? So it's really important for us to recognize that if it's too hard, it's probably not small enough. And so incredibly important. And, just to remind everybody that if we actually take a quantum microscopic commitment to even just one of those keystone habits, after 30 days, I can promise you that we start seeing shifts with as little as 2 minutes. And we have a 5-2-7 rule, right? It's 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 7. And why do we say 5-2-7? Easy to remember. 5 days in a working week, 2 days in a weekend, 7 days in a full week. And also what we'll be talking about in one of our future roundtables is there are 7 mindsets to modern leadership. So 5-2-7. So the smallest commitment you need to make in a day to increase your success as a leader or your transformation program is 2 minutes. That's all it needs to take for you to start seeing a shift over a period of time. So that's a little bit about the Keystone Habits. What I also want to do today, and this is something that I want to offer to everybody on every round table, is this: an absolute, free pro bono strategy session with me. So if there's something that you have heard about today that you think to yourself, gosh, I want to know more about this for myself, I want to go deeper in my own leadership, or gosh, actually, how would that translate into something that I'm designing at a wider system level? If that's kind of, if that's where you're at the moment, then please, I really encourage any of you to take advantage of a strategy session, and I'll send it to everybody with the playback as well. So I'll send a link to my Calendly. And what we'll do in that session is we'll talk a little bit about where you are now and where you want to go, where your transformation is now, where that transformation is going, and what processes will get you there, and potentially whether quantum leadership is something that would resonate for you. So my last slide, I know you can guess this last slide. I just thought I'd get a little bit dramatic and melodramatic for us today, because it's Wednesday, it's top of the week, and I got that email, didn't I? And that email said, how can you make the rest of this week great? So instead of a round table, I've put Excalibur. So I want to open it out now to the floor. I just want to see, who's willing to pull that sword out of the stone and share a story or ask me a question, share a challenge that you might have, and let's together, let's debate, and let's see if we can solutionize that for you around these keystone habits. And what I'll do for that is just stop sharing. And Sanjay, I think you've just come straight off mute there. So I wonder if you've got something to share with us.
I just shared 2-3 thoughts of mine, which I've come across when I've been interacting with people. First is what you said about journaling. What suggestion I normally give to young people is, when you start off a day early in the morning by a walk, the fresh air is there and you feel good about it. And that is the time when you can plan your day ahead, what you can do and organize things. So it helps you to get off a good start for the day. So when you're walking, you can think of various thoughts, what you need to do today, etc., etc. And that you can, as I said, come back and journal them or write put them on a small notepad, and write. At the end of the day, you can reflect on what you achieved, what you thought in the morning, what went wrong, because the day is dynamic. Things can change. That is one. Second is regarding the experimental mindset, as you're saying. Typically I found that when people are trying something new, they make mountains out of molehills. What can go wrong? Like I experienced with this with my wife, and when we go for a walk on an unknown path. For me, it is exploration, finding something new. The thought with which I go across is, well, I'm going to see some new places, something new is going to come up, a surprise or something like that. But where she's scared, where are we going? What if something goes wrong? So those molehills become mountains of fear. What can go wrong, rather than focusing on what you're going to learn on the way. That is very important. And the third is about incremental growth. As I said, when we were practicing yoga as teachers, so I told my friends that, for you, every day is a small shift. But one of your friends who sees you after a month will realize how far you come in the journey in terms of flexibility and the way you perform your yoga asanas, etc., etc. Those are just a few of my thoughts in terms of what you already brought in.
Oh, Sanjay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for those thoughts. I think they're brilliant. And you're absolutely right. Your first thought is we can connect that Keystone 1 journaling. You can connect them, can't you? You can be intentional at the start of the day, and then you can reflect back on how you did at the end of the day. I think that's absolutely superb. And you've made me think about something as well that a lot of people that I work with do, is they when they're walking and reflecting, or maybe in some cases meditating, if you've got your phone with you, you've got a little voice recorder in there. So if something comes to mind, you can just voice it in, and you've just got a little memo that's captured something there. And that in itself can be a very easy way to kind of record and maybe just put something in as a journal. And I think, your second point about that experimental bit, the more we expose ourselves to new things, and the less deeply focused we are on what we do and who we are, the less fear there is around change, because there isn't as much to lose. And a lot of the time when you're thinking about organizational change and transformation, people that are most resistant and fearful are probably people that are not that experimental and not widening their frame of reference, which means that what they've got to lose is so much deeper and so much more important to them because of that narrow frame of reference. So, you're absolutely right, the power of experimental. And also, just on your last bit about incremental growth, there is, and I don't know who it is, but there is a famous quote that says, work on your development and your leadership with such vigor that at the end of every month, everybody has to get to know you all over again. And I just think that's a fantastic quote and idea. And it's, it's just what you said there from a yoga perspective, how people perceive you as an individual after a month. You are already different retrospectively, aren't you? So that's brilliant. That's fantastic. Oh, thanks, Sanjay. Some really great thoughts there. Anyone else have any thoughts? Any shares?
I do, Mel. Oh, go on.
No, you go, Tara.
Oh, I just was thinking about the learning bit that you were talking about, and the other bit I would add to that is around your learning muscles. And I think not only people who don't do a lot of learning then find themselves fixed in terms of that space. I think just the fact of if you're engaging with a lot of different things and you're learning things regularly, you're open then to learning things when they emerge through that experimentation or through the failure or whatever that looks like, because you've sort of developed the muscles for it. And I often talk to people at work who, we're trying to build a learning culture and we're a bit stuck. We haven't really we're not where we need to be. And it's like when you're learning to either, your yoga practice or learning to run, just do a small bit to start with, but you have to get comfortable with, like you do, that discomfort of getting fitter. Just see it through to that last bit, that small bit, that it's your brain sweating if you're not used to learning. And it's so uncomfortable that it's easy to just say, no, I can't do that. It's too hard. I don't know. sometimes people have a real sense of resistance in their brain to the idea of what if I can never understand it, or this is really hard for me. It's that ability to stay with that long enough to just keep building those muscles, and then actually it opens up this new aperture for learning and your ability to then take on those new concepts and move through change more smoothly and quickly, all linked together.
Oh, what a great articulation of Keystone there, Tara. That was bloody brilliant. I love it. It's you're absolutely right. And again, like, if it's as leaders of change and transformation, it's almost our obligation to help people recognize that if it's too hard, it isn't small enough. So how can we break it down for them? I think that's so incredibly important. And one of the other things for me, and we'll talk about this, hello pussycat, we'll talk about this in another round table, because we'll deep dive into the concept of habits itself. But so many people think that it only takes 2 weeks to establish a habit, and it doesn't. To embed a habit, it takes 66 days, and that's a mean average. It can take up to 268 days if it's something that is very, very specific. But I think in our world of transformation and change, it's absolutely what you say. It's that, that the learning bit is about building that muscle and exercising that muscle. And there is sweat and there is conflict and resistance at the start. So it has to be small. And, one of the things that we say in quantum leadership is you want to try and get all of your habits around that 66-day type of habit. You don't really want habits that are 260. I mean, come on, life, it's not what life's about, is it? Seriously.
No. No. But the other thing is, once you're fit enough, the running doesn't hurt anymore, and you get that joy endorphin. And I think yoga practice might be the same, the early stages of getting into that, but then the actual flow of that and the great joy that it brings you. Learning is the same. Once you've got past that sort of initial, as you say, 66 days, 268 days, you actually crave it and you need it, and it actually brings about endorphins. There's a complete shift of mindset, and that's exactly what you're looking to achieve, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And with endorphins comes something else, which is dopamine. And what does dopamine do? It motivates you. Dopamine gives you the drive to keep going. So you're absolutely right. I love it, Tara. It's fantastic. We've got just a minute or two left. And Vivian, I know that you were going to say something. I'd love to hear your thoughts or your question.
So, very conscious of time. So I was just going to ask you about the frame of reference, Keystone Habit, and how practically you might reflect that in a habit on a daily basis. Because I can think practically about how I would apply all of the other Keystone Habits, and journaling has been completely transformative for me. I do it every day without even at the weekends, and it's been so powerful. But I'm sort of thinking, right, how do I get that frame of reference, Keystone Habit, built into my day? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, by the way. I love it. And I think, the big thing about the frame of reference is the conscious awareness of it. So the habit is the conscious awareness of it as opposed to the action of it. So I'm habitually consciously aware of, unconsciously aware, I should say, of frame of reference, and everywhere I make connections on it. What I have to support that as a result is I've built other habits around frame of reference that are very specific, actionable habits. So they're less about kind of, unconscious awareness, which is what the keystone is. I make habits. So for example, I have a daily habit of 2 minutes in World Economic Forum every day. And I don't even think about it. That's an actionable domino effect as a result of the main keystone. So I think the keystone habit of frame of reference is the unconscious awareness of frame of reference. How can you habitually make yourself unconsciously aware of it? And then the action habits then come out as a result of. Does that make sense? Or would you like me to go into another example? Because I know that we've gone a couple of minutes over.
That makes sense. And I can already think about, right, I know what I'm going to do now to really keep that top of mind and constantly be looking at that and make that unconscious.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big thing with the frame of reference is that unconscious awareness is you're going to have to break it down. You have to break it down. It's not the sort of thing that you say, yeah, I can get it and I'll start doing it tomorrow. It's got to be, because it's genuine unconscious practice, unconscious awareness. Absolutely.
Thank you.
No worries. So we would go, we're a couple of minutes over, but great discussion, fantastic feedback. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Next week, we're actually going to be talking about a transformation mechanic. So we're going to shift gear a little bit next week. We're not necessarily going to be talking about ourselves as leaders. We're going to be talking about a technique and a mechanic for how we can accelerate change and transformation within the organization or the workplace. So more on that to come. But thank you everybody for joining. And as always, what we'll be doing is we'll be sending out the recording to you all and the slides so that you can recap on the slides as well. Have a fantastic rest of the day, Wednesday, for those of you that are in the Northern Hemisphere, and for those of you that are in the Southern Hemisphere, have a lovely, good evening. And I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.